Thanks so much for being here. My name is Chris Shepard. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Cerius Executives, and I want to welcome you to the Cerius Speaker Series today, which is entitled Unlocking Your Company's Growth Potential. And we have a special guest on, a member of our network, and just a really great guy, Gary Leeman. We're going to get to that in just a second. But this idea about unlocking your company's potential really is something that was foundational to why Cerius was founded all the way back in 2005, which feels like a lifetime ago. One of the things that our company founders saw, which was that companies needed a better way to find executives that could help move the business forward. Yes, there were executive vacancies and there were search firms that were out there helping solve that. But many times a company doesn't even need to replace an executive as much as they just need some help to help get through a ceiling, to help get through a breakthrough, to help really get through an area of the business that isn't going as well as it should. And back in 2005, there really wasn't a place to turn to find those executives, to know what their backgrounds and experience was, to be able to help come in and move a company forward. So our founder, Pamela Wasley, along with her co-owner, Kristen McAllister, started all those years ago building a network of top C-level executives, not that just had the right resume or not that had the right job titles, but really had the right experience and had been through enough transformations and breakthroughs and solving problems that they could really help move companies forward, not just in a hands-off way, but a very hands-on, actionable way. So for the past 17 years, we've been building this network, not of just resumes, not of just names, but of specific experiences solving problems for our clients. How we do that looks a number of different ways. Sometimes the client needs an interim, someone to step in, decades of experience, hands-on, solve the problem, and then pass it on to others once it's taken care of. Other times the company needs a part-time or a fractional, someone just to come in, give that experience over a longer period of time, advise the company on next steps as they grow. And lastly, we still do the traditional direct hire. Sometimes you just need someone in there all the time, fully committed to the project, and we do all of those. One of the things that does separate us from others is just the speed at which we go to market and our revenue approach. Most of our executives, when we find a client that has a need, we articulate that need, we can get them an executive in less than a week because we've worked with these executives for years. We know what they're best at. We don't have to go find, from outside sources right away. Whenever someone has a need, we first come to our network. Who have we used before? Who do we know and trust that can solve this? And because of that, by the time the retainer would have processed, we could already have introduced you the right candidate. So we don't charge an upfront fee. You pay us when you pick the right person. The process, it isn't just introductions. If your executive search firm you're using now makes an introduction and leaves, you should find a new search firm. We stay involved the entire time in the process. Our vice presidents of client services are expert business consultants. They know how to help you articulate what's really wrong with the business. Once we have that need assessed, we can quickly identify and introduce the right executive, introduce the scope of work, and then we stay involved the whole time. This is how we know what our executives do best because we've used many of them on assignment. We know where the shortcomings are. We know where the pitfalls are. We know where they excel, and we put them in those opportunities. A lot of companies decided to niche down 20 years ago, only do one thing, only do one industry. We realized that companies across the board and across our country needed help in all functional areas. So this network that we've built covers all functional areas and all industries. So within operations, this is what some of those look like. Additionally, within finance, it can be a fractional controller or all the way up to a direct hire CFO, everything in between. Something that's been especially important over the last 24 months or 36 months has been the human resources function. Companies really struggle to get the right executive leader in for this department. We've been able to help a ton of them. And lastly, sales and marketing, which have always been functional areas in which lots of companies and lots of different industries needed help. And one of the things that they often need help with is breaking through the ceiling. It's something we hear very often with our clients is my company was growing and now it's not. I don't feel like we've changed anything, but we're not getting more results like we did before. Everyone's looking at me for the answers. I don't have them. What do I do next? It's a real problem. It's a real thing, but there's also a real solution. And that's what our speaker, Gary Leeman, is here to talk about today. Gary is dedicated to helping other entrepreneurs achieve their business and personal goals. He helps entrepreneurial organizations focus on what matters most, implement a proven and highly effective operating system, and gain traction towards their vision. Gary, thanks for being on the call today.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you to everyone at Cerius here, Kristen, Chris. I've met Kristen 3 years ago, and I have subsequently met dozens of really, really great professional, talented executives that are now in my network, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk here today.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. Gary, this phrase of hitting the ceiling, it's super common for me. We talk about it a lot here at Cerius. Our clients say that often. Why is that cap, that limit? Why is that inevitable for companies as they grow?
So, to define it simply, right, hitting the ceiling is just that feeling of getting stuck, right? What worked before is no longer working, as you said earlier. And there was a study called The Evolution and Revolution as Companies Grow. And it was done by a professor at USC called Larry Greiner. I think the school is the Marshall School of Business. In that study, he showed that every single growing organization hits multiple ceilings. They start and they grow through something similar to evolution until they hit their ceiling. When they no longer achieve their next goals, they start to flatline. And what he showed was every company that will continue to grow has to go through a period of revolution. Significant change, structural change needs to occur. Now, there's three outcomes that happen. You either break through the ceiling and continue to grow, you flatline, or you fail, right? So inevitably, companies will hit a ceiling, and they'll hit a ceiling in three ways. It shows up at an organizational level, at a department level, and also at an individual level. And the good news is every time you break through a ceiling, you're gonna hit another ceiling, right? So everyone does.
That's great. So how do we overcome this ceiling? I know in previous conversations, we've talked about 5 key abilities.
Yeah.
Just reel those off real quick, and then we'll start to unpack them on the call today.
Yeah, so I teach my clients about the 5 key leadership abilities, and those are simplify, delegate and elevate, predict, systemize, and structure, right? So simply put, a combination of those leadership abilities are what are required to consistently break through the ceiling successfully. Also, to be able to raise that ceiling as you start to master these abilities, that inevitable ceiling that's coming tends to be a little bit further down the road, and you're more prepared for that next ceiling. It's a matter of truly understanding that this is an inevitable situation, but don't overcomplicate it, right? If you can master these 5 abilities, like 80% of everything you need to get through a ceiling is going to be there.
Yeah. Well, let's unpack them one at a time, Gary. Let's focus on the first ability, which is the ability to simplify. Something that we see time and time again with clients is as the business grows, they assume that more complexity is required, right? If they don't make it harder, it won't ever get bigger. And I got a feeling that's probably the wrong next step. So walk us through this ability to simplify and how do companies simplify very complex organizational structures?
Yeah, no, I think we often tend to delude ourselves that complicated is better, and one of my foundational mantras with all of my clients is keep it simple, less is more, right? Do less better. the act of simplification is absolutely required because complexity grows exponentially as an organization grows. Imagine a company that starts with window replacements, right? They have a salesperson, one installation crew, maybe someone in purchasing, maybe someone in project management, and an owner wearing a lot of hats and keeping their eye on everything, right? Just imagine that first step. I'm going to get another salesperson, go after another town, another installation crew. You're adding 20% of headcount, and you probably doubled complexity. Right now, imagine what happens when they go, we're going to have to start making windows ourselves because that's a big cost item, and all these other companies vertically integrate. Now they're manufacturing windows. Boom, right? Complexity gets completely out of hand, right? It's inevitable. Complexity just happens. I'll give you a quick story. Imagine working in a company and a simple process used to take two people involved and it would take 20 minutes, right? Imagine that company now that's got 1,000 employees. That same thing, that's now multiple meetings. It's between silos. There are new forms to fill out. It's now a weeks-long process involving 30 people. Why? The task hasn't changed, right? The organization has become far too complex for it. So it's a matter of really asking questions, asking leaders a key job, that leadership ability to go in and just question why. Why do we do this? Why is that important? Right? Why is that required? Why, where did that come from? I love the story. Mary Barrett, the CEO of General Motors, right? She was an HR executive, and she took a 7-page dress code down to dress appropriately. Right? Could you imagine the meetings that she was in? Like, she's going to hear the horror stories of like the one person who showed up in 6-inch platforms that broke her ankle, and now their legal's involved, and facilities involved, and all of a sudden a very justified 7-page dress code.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No, dress appropriate. That's what keeping it simple looks like. That's what simplification looks like. And as you root out simplification, okay, it makes everybody's job easier. It creates efficiencies. Yep.
No, that's super helpful. So I need to throw out my 12-page sales playbook and just tell the sales team sell more, right?
I would
first
say
step.
Yes. There's a level. There's a level,
right?
Yeah. There's a level.
But I think the important thing there that I took away, Gary, was in those meetings where it's looking like we need to make it more complex, the right leader needs to be intentional about saying, how can we do this more simple? How can we still get the right outcome, but always have simplicity as something that is part of the conversation, and not just let things spin out of control from a complexity standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's invisible, right? So as we grow as leaders and our scope and span increases, we're less involved in the day-to-day. We rely more and more on the people to figure it out and get it done. And we're not seeing the system. And they cannot see the system. They're not at 30,000 feet to see the impact of their decisions. And they make good decisions with the best intentions. Not seeing how it adds to the overall complexity. So yes, you have to always be mindful. Are we doing the most important things the right way? And are we wasting time on other things we shouldn't?
Great. I think that brings us perfectly to the next ability, which I'm just going to be honest. I should probably be talking to my therapist about this, but I'll talk to you, Gary. It's to delegate and elevate, right? I built this company, right? This is what a lot of our clients say. I built this company. I've got to do it. If I don't do it, no one will. But that leads to that ceiling that you talked about. One person only has so much capacity, right? So talk to us about delegate and elevate, how leaders can start to learn how to delegate and really focus on those higher level tasks that do need their attention while handing off the things that don't.
Yeah. And this is a challenge exactly for that reason. If you think about the 5 leadership abilities, they are all designed to help break through a ceiling. And I discussed how that could be organizational level, department level, individual level, right? Delegate is a very an inward looking question. It does then start to improve an organization and department's level, but it's really a question of what Dan Sullivan calls your unique ability, right? What is it that you love to do that you're truly gifted at? And how do you spend more time doing that? Now, the challenge with an owner, right, with a leadership team is they kind of are convinced, and they're not always wrong, that they can do almost everything better. They've been doing it longer, they've been doing it from the beginning, and it's very difficult to trust that, okay, I can hand this off. Okay, but what's keeping a lot of CEOs up at night is attracting and retaining top talent. And top talent needs to grow, they want to grow. And you have an obligation to provide opportunities. So if you're not delegating, you're not providing those opportunities. And if you're not elevating, you're spending far too much of your time doing things you're not great at, that you don't love doing, and it's sucking your energy. So to the ability that you can push yourself beyond that fear and into, when I work with leaders that take that first step, the benefit of having those 2 hours to really sit and strategize with their friend about where they want to go next fills them up so much that they start to get addicted to it. They start to really look at those things that they can start getting off their plate. And it's really, simple. Again, everything I love simple. Simple's great. So I just ask people to create a list. Everything you do this week, and even the things that are important, like in a monthly or quarterly, there you go, you have a list. And you just put them in 4 quadrants. What do you love to do and what are you great at? And what do you like doing you're pretty good at? What don't you like but you are good at? And what are the things you don't like doing and you're not good at? And then it becomes obvious. I don't even have to ask the question, right? When it comes time to delegate something, you know what you're going to delegate. It's stuff you don't like that you're not good at, and think of how freeing that is. And the irony is we tend to think, well, I don't like it. I don't want to give that to somebody. They're not going to like it. If that were true, there'd be no like accountants in the world or tax attorneys. Like, I don't like that stuff, but these people, it floats their boat, right? They get huge energy. So don't let that fool you. If you have leaders and they're looking for growth opportunities, just ask. Hey, I want to stop getting I want to get out of these board presentations. Oh, I love an opportunity to build a board presentation. Okay, yeah. So that's how you do it. It's very personal.
That quadrant exercise, Gary, if any of the leaders on the call today haven't went through that, really encourage them to do so. We feel like in the moment, I have to be doing all the things I'm currently doing. There is no other option. But once you put it into those quadrants, you take it to I'm not good at this and I don't like it, right? It's almost embarrassing how obvious it is that, hey, this business owner shouldn't be doing these things. This is really clear. And it really does free up their time to do some of the other things that probably only they can do, which is like the next business, the next ability, which is the ability to predict, right? Business owners do need to be able to spend time saying, where is the market 1 year, 5 year, 10 year? Any tips or tools there for a leader to develop their ability to predict?
Yeah. So, but you made a really great point. I want to land a little bit more on Delegate, Elevate.
Sure.
When I did that exercise, I felt so foolish because immediately I saw the error of my ways. I've been holding on to things, thinking if I don't like it, no one else will, and so I'll take one for the team. And a lot of leaders are empathetic and they're trying to care for their team, and you're actually hurting your team when you do that. You are. So it's as simple as just identifying what you really are good at. And by the way, your organization needs you to spend the time doing your unique ability. That's if everybody did that in an organization, you're on fire, right? So I just wanted to say that. This is usually the fun one for me, because a lot of people, this is when I'll get eye rolls. I'll get some eye rolling. All right. People can wrap their head around, keep it simple. We've heard that our whole life. And, we should delegate. If you've been in business long enough, you're told that by management. But like the ability to predict, right? It usually usually get some eye rolls because, like, do you know how AI is going to change your business in 2 years? Do you know how AI is going to change it in a year, 6 months? No, right? So people tend to go, well, the future's unpredictable. And when people get in that mode, the human nature is, if I don't know how to do something, it's probably not possible. It probably can't be done. So I ask everyone the simple question, right? Do you know how to build a satellite? No? Do you believe it can be done? Right? So just because you don't know how to do something today doesn't mean it can't be done. And a lot of people get predicting a little bit off. They think they need to be able to crystal ball. So I'm not into 5-year detailed strategic plan roadmaps. I think that's an illusion. We look at prediction in the long term and short term. Long term is simply, do you have a set long-term goal? 10 years, where do we want to be? And what's our general plan to get there? That's a long-term vision. To be able to hit that, you need to start bringing it down to the ground. So this is where prediction becomes more and more, there's fidelity involved. So you paint a 3-year picture, right? What do we need to look like in 3 years to be there in 10? And with that, you can say, okay, so what's this year's plan? Right? So each of those steps, right, it becomes a little easier, right? Figuring out what you need to be in 3 years to make it to 10, you can make that leap. Okay, if we have to be here in 3 years, what do I need to get done this year? You can make that leap. Now it gets to be real. Now you have a 1-year plan. You know what your profit, your revenue, other key metrics you need to hit. So now ask yourself and your leaders, well, in the next 90 days, what do we really need to accomplish in order to stay on track? Right? So that's part of predicting. Now, 90 days in is short-term predicting. And the key to short-term predicting is dealing with issues. Believe it or not, that's the key. Clever leaders work around issues and they avoid them. They suffer through them. Smart leaders solve them. And the reason is, if you have a known 90-day priority and you have an issue you've been avoiding, it puts that priority at risk. And if you're not tackling that issue, the chances of success of hitting that rock go down. The chances of successfully landing the year go down. And then you tell yourself, well, you're no good at predicting. And that's not true. So when I work with leadership teams, and I'll give you an example. I worked with a leadership team. They had a people issue on the board for 2 straight quarters. And we were setting priorities for the following quarter. And they landed an exciting new contract. Everyone was aligned. It was part of their 1-year plan. So they secured a client in Mexico, and they were heavily tech, right? So they needed their infrastructure to be able to support. And they knew that their current data center was not going to be able to support Mexico with the SLAs in the contract. The issue they had been avoiding is their IT director had been slow playing the migration of the data center. Well, now all of a sudden, that became such a critical issue because it was going to derail the rock that they confronted it and dealt with it. And so think about that. They became better at predicting what was required to be successful on the rock. Then they became better at dealing with the risk that was going to knock the rock off track. At the end of that quarter during review, 4 of the leaders had completed 8 of the 10 rocks they signed up for. And they all said it was the best quarter they ever had in terms of actually saying, I'm going to get it done and getting it done. And then the best part was when we talked about rocks for the following quarter, it was a heated debate, but it was healthy because now people were challenging. Like, what's the risk? Do we have an issue to get that done? Is that the most important thing? Is that rock written smart? And that's predicting. And for me, it's helping people understand, don't think that you need to know exactly what's going to happen 5 years from today. Don't, right? Focus in on what's required this 90 days and get it done. Those build to a successful year. Those build to hitting 3-year, and you're on your way.
Yep. If you can't predict what you're going to get done in 90 days, you can't predict what you're going to get done in 90 months, right?
100%.
It's really that simple. No, it's a great point. Fourth ability, Gary, systematize. How
Yeah.
can leaders start to put some of this stuff into effective systems and processes within their organization that'll just streamline the opportunities and just set them up to support the growth?
I'll lead with the obvious, right? It's not creating a 700-page SOP. All
That's
right,
good.
documenting everything, right, is a feel-good exercise that's a huge time and money waste. Nobody's going to read it, can't be followed, can't be managed to. What I teach my clients is to identify the 6 to 8 core business processes that keep the company operating, maintain customers, maintain value delivery. Okay, so you're going to have a sales process, you're going to have some operations processes, accounting, HR, right? 7 to 9 core processes. Once we identify those, once you identify the core processes, document them at a high level. So we take what we call a 20-80 approach. What are 20% of the steps that could possibly be written out, right? If you task somebody in that department, how do I fulfill this order? Give me everything. You're going to get, I log into this system, right? And then I go to this screen and they'll give you screenshots. And it's like,
yes,
we're talking about what are the 20% of the steps that get you 80% of the value. If you document that and you start managing to that, right? You train your people to that, what we call followed by all, everything becomes simpler. It becomes easier to manage people, train people, check on performance, and really solve root cause issues. When something goes awry on a core process and you've got 90 steps somebody was supposed to follow, you're going to hear someone say they didn't do step 83. That was the problem. Step 83 has nothing to do with delivering. But if you got 12 steps and they didn't do steps 9 and 10, there you go. Don't do that again, right? And so what happens? You reduce rework, you reduce mistakes, profitability goes up, right? It's easier. Frankly, people are happier on their jobs because they know they're being managed to the stuff that's important. Nobody wants to be told, you didn't get the TPS report in. Right? I mean,
yeah.
So that's how we look at Systemize.
Yeah, I'm starting to see, Gary, this is really helpful how these abilities build onto each other, right? The simplicity that we talked about first also shows back up in the systematize, right? Because what is the simplest system possible to help move the business forward? What 20% will get us 80% of the results? And now let's move on to the next thing. So that's super helpful to see how these things start to build and really culminate in this last leadership ability, which is the ability to structure. I can't tell you how many times, especially really within the last 36 months, as the pandemic has accelerated some things that probably would have happened anyway. Our clients are calling us, Gary. They're saying, hey, here's where the numbers are, and here's where the plans are, but our organizational structure is wrong. And now we realize the structure of the organization doesn't support the organization. Talk to us about some key points and some things to think through in this kind of methodology around structure.
Yeah, I love the way you set that up because, these 5 leadership abilities do not only influence each other and support each other, but it has to be all of them. All right. So this is the perfect example of when, you want to try and solve a problem with one, right? Okay, we're going to fix this by reorging, right? So I worked with a lot of, organizational development teams in large organizations, and they were very skilled at polling the leaders and connecting the vision and the strategy and looking at a structure and creating org charts and then job descriptions, success criteria, new reporting, and well, there's some matrix here and not, and I mean, it looked very impressive on paper. By the time the reorg rolls through, and the realization comes in that it didn't really achieve the goal, guess what the solution is? Reorg, right? Talk about job security, right? For organizational development. They're always going to be in demand because you're never going to get it right that way, right? So what we do, I talked a little bit, right? So when you delegate and elevate, ultimately that shows up in what we call the accountability chart. And if you are working on simplifying, and again, none of these things happen overnight. You start rooting out complexity. Complexity will keep creeping in, it's entropy. But if you stay diligent about that and make things simpler, that means you're making roles more defined and people's jobs simpler. If you start to systemize and you know exactly what the steps are required, then you can start really understanding what skills and expertise is required to do that. And if you have reduced complexity and you've elevated people into positions, right, and you've got things structured, your accountability chart will inevitably be smaller because you're not filling in a bunch of redundant seats because work is overly complex, okay? So we start with defining what are seats or the roles. So we'll start at the leadership level. What are the 4 to 7 leadership positions? Clearly defined responsibilities or roles. What's the role? What is a sales leader accountable for? What's the CFO accountable for? We never put a name in. You don't put a name into a seat until the structure's built. And it's a forward-looking. What does the structure of the organization need to be to support our business if we hit our goals 6 to 12 months? So you're thinking forward, you're defining roles and structure. You take each leader then and build their structure. That's the accountability chart. Then it's about putting the right people in the right seats, right? So that's a Jim Collins thing. But the way we think about right people, right seats, we simplify it, right? Right people is simply, do they display the core values of the organization? Do they fit the organization? Are they people you want to work with? Gotta, they have to be the right people, otherwise they're poisoning you. Okay. Right seats, we use a concept we call get it, want it, capacity. Okay. So when you look at a seat, you go, well, Betty's doing this role. Is she good for the company? Does she fit the values? Yeah. Does she get it, want it, have the capacity? Right. So get it. What does get it? Get is like, is it their unique ability? Is it things they're love to do that, that their unique abilities say, yeah, they're excellent at it, right? They've got the job experience and skill set. Want it, right? Do they want it? Okay, I was a manager and a PMO. I didn't want it. I got it. I could do it. I didn't want it, right? And then the capacity. Now, this is where Delegate and Elevate shows up again, because you're not going to have the capacity to consistently operate and fill that seat and deliver on it if you're not spending your time doing the right work, if you haven't let go of some things that are going to impede you. Now you got to have both. If you put the right people in the right seats, you've got the structure you need. And if your structure is around delivering against your systemized core processes, and the work has been simplified as much as you can, right? And you can predict where you're going to be in 6 to 12 months, so you kind of can predict who you need and what skills you need. You got the whole picture, right? Now you've got an accountability chart. So we don't believe in org charts. We believe in accountability charts.
Yeah, that's super helpful, Gary. I think we've given the people on the call today, these business leaders and owners, I think we've thrown a lot at them today, right? Yeah. This is usually a multi-week, month-long process, right? Growing a business is a lifelong process, right?
Lifelong process.
I really appreciate the clarity around all these different steps, these abilities. There's going to be a lot more content that we throw in their direction from our conversation both today and the conversations we're going to be having in the fall. Lastly, what advice would you give entrepreneurs or leaders who feel stuck or overwhelmed by the ceiling, right?
Yeah.
I think we gave them a lot of clarity today. I think we gave them a lot of really clear next steps. But is there just a final thing you kind of want to leave them with? Because when they log off the Zoom call, all the problems they had before they logged on, still going to be there, right?
Yep.
Take us home.
Well, when I work with my clients, and usually I start, they're at a ceiling. They haven't broken through, right? But I start by congratulating them. Not every company was able to grow their business to the point where they've actually hit a ceiling. That's a milestone. That's an achievement, right? So also it happens with every company. It's inevitable. So you're just like everyone else. Now we just got to figure out how to break through that ceiling. Okay. And I just remind everyone, trust yourself, right? Just because what got you here won't get you there. You have the abilities to get here. So why do you think you don't have the abilities to break through and get there, right? Trust yourself, trust the process, trust your people, but be really mindful of those people who won't let go, right? Be mindful of those people who want to operate in a black box, who resist the change, who resist, they think their power lies in I'm a sacred cow, right? So this is where your leadership skills are always tested the most. So realize that when you go into this, it is called a revolution for a reason, right? You've evolved to break through ceiling. It's a revolution. Revolutions are ugly, painful, fraught with risk and challenges. Like, you just gotta stick with it, trust yourself, and challenge your people and make hard decisions. If somebody is stopping the entire organization from growing, then you know what you got to do. And that's the hardest part, but it's the most important part.
Gary, thanks so much for your time today. This has been super enlightening for me, and just the preparation of this. Thanks for being an expert. Thanks for being a part of the Cerius network. Everyone else on the call, there are a number of resources out there to help with this specific topic. And maybe you've got 3 of the 5 under control, right? And there's just 1 or 2 that you need help with. Lots of resources out there. We're going to send them to you after this meeting. And also, if you could see where Gary's a member of our network, we have thousands of people like him, where a fractional or an interim leader really could come in, and maybe simplification isn't one of your key things, right? It's important, but it isn't your thing. Bringing someone in from the outside can often be that trigger that really gets you over the hump for simplification, or for delegation, or for systemizing, or, as Gary mentioned, it's really good time to be in organizational development right now, because that's a really big thing. There are resources out there to help you. This company was started 17 years ago to be one of them, and we're glad that you're here on it today. We thank you for your time, and on behalf of everyone at Cerius, we look to see you again real soon. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.